I started teaching 30 years ago and taught for about 8 years, then became an educational consultant and then the general education administrator for a very rural area in northern Michigan, and we work with 34 schools. 8 years ago, I heard Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman present on Stop Teaching Our Kids to Kill. And 2.5-hour presentation. He does a fantastic job at really summarizing the research on media violence. As an educator, I was one of these folks that loved reading research articles, and I knew nothing about this research. As a parent and as an educator, I'd been worried about the increasing amount of violence, but the research, in this case, the AMA, the APA, pediatrics, all looked at 30 years of research and said, in fact, that media violence is a causal factor for violent behavior in our children. In the United States, the majority of people like me are clueless about the research. Turns out University of Michigan, actually 40 years of research, strong research. They've got a good website. And repeated exposure to media violence is a stronger factor than living in poverty, engaging in substance abuse, or having abusive parents. The Supreme Court right now has agreed to hear a case. California and 9 other states have written laws making it illegal to sell violent video games, like the next one, to minors, and they were overturned by a federal court where the judge said, First Amendment, as Bob said, in the U.S., we worship it. The judge said there is no research showing any psychological harm from these violent video games. As Bob said earlier, not only is there more research showing there is harm, but the media industry is effective at really keeping that research quiet. What we were most concerned about in schools really are these violent video games. Grand Theft Auto. I have a second and third grade teacher that said they asked their kids, how many of you have played this game? And 30% of second graders say we've played this game. After we heard Dave Grossman, my secretary, went home and asked her 12-year-old son, have you ever played Grand Theft Auto? He said, Mom, your brother bought it for me for Christmas. I own the game. And when we first started working with media education, many parents were clueless, like me, but what we see now that's particularly troublesome is young dads that are playing these games with their children. Just when we thought the technology can't get much worse, we now have, my daughter is in college and her house has one of these Wii stations where you can play tennis and golf and bowling virtually with your computer. Well, you now can murder someone virtually. So this is Manhunt. If you go to YouTube and put in Manhunt, you'll get to see what the video game does. But you are in an institution, and to escape, you have to kill people. You have a friend with you who coaches you. You see someone, and he says, you got to kill him. You got to kill him now. And you say, I've never killed anyone. He says, you got to do it, or he's going to kill us. So you can virtually kill. You have 17 different ways. You can take a knife and you literally are making the movements and you see the blood. You can take an axe and chop off heads and arms. You can strangle someone, and again, you are virtually doing all of those movements. So in England, even adults can't buy this game, but in the United States, not only can adults buy the game, but young children can. We have a new game coming out in July called School Shooter, based on Littleton and Virginia Tech, where you are, to get points, you are killing students. You see, just like these, you see the blood, and at the very end, you then can decide whether you want to end it by committing suicide. After Dave Grossman spoke for 2.5 hours, the light at the end of the tunnel was the Stanford curriculum. Stanford University developed student media awareness to reduce television. And they developed it for 3rd or 4th grade students. And their research showed it was effective. They got kids to reduce the amount of screens. And it was actually developed as an obesity reduction program. And the National Institutes of Health has identified it as one of the most effective weight gain obesity reduction programs in the country, even though they never talk about nutrition or physical activity. Just by getting kids to turn off the screen. But what they also found was a reduction in aggression. Verbal aggression, as Jacques said, I think 50%, physical aggression on the playground by 40%, as well as reduction in requests for toys. We were most interested in the aggression. As teachers, we were concerned about the increased aggression in our schools. A survey just done, almost half of teenagers say they have been bullied in a way that seriously upset them, and 50% said they had bullied someone else. And we were also concerned about just the amount of times, this was shared earlier, 7.5 hours of media a day, 4.5 hours of that is television. The survey was done back in 2006, and the 4.5 hours has stayed the same. What's increasing is all of the other media. What concerns us is 7.5 hours a day comes out to almost 3,000 hours a year. In the United States, kids are in school about 1,000 hours a year. So in fact, TV, video games are educating our kids. After I heard Dave, I did 2 things. The first thing I did was I called Stanford and ordered the Stanford S.M.A.R.T curriculum. It wasn't ready yet. They were still printing it, so 2 months later we got it. The second thing I did was write a grant because I wanted to do this school-wide. I felt that many educators, 3rd or 4th grade is good, but if you can do something school-wide that has so much more power with it. So for the last 8 years, we've actually received 3 federal grants, and we've been continuing to improve the curriculum. We have now preschool through high school, and this is 2nd grade. If you go to our website, takethechallengenow.net, you can print off the curriculum. We're not charging for it at all now. Our goal is to get it out there. Just to give you an idea of what's in the elementary curriculum, there are really 4 stages. The first is where Dr. Robbins said you almost want the kids to become little scientists. They want to understand just how much time they're spending watching TV. They take a log home because you want the parents to realize it. And so we have kindergarten kids doing graphs. The older kids do more sophisticated graphing. And the 3rd lesson, you have them brainstorm, what do you really like doing? What's most fun of all? And movies will show up, TV will show up, but you also see lots of other things. And the purpose is to get kids to understand, if you're spending 7.5 hours a day in front of TV, video games, you're missing out. Then the second phase is the beginning of the 10-day screen-free challenge. And you have an opening ceremony. The second lesson is to get kids to brainstorm things to do instead of watching TV, because kids don't know how to play anymore. Then the 3rd phase is where the kids stay in control. You now bring the media back, but you keep it to 7 to 10 hours a week. And role play solutions. They do a lot of role playing. Your grandmother shows up, she's got a video for you to watch. How can you tell her that you don't want to watch the video? And this is when the kids start once a week looking at the keeping it under 7 hours. Then finally, the last phase is educating others. And in fact, the Stanford curriculum, he has a letter from himself saying, I have patients that watch too much TV, and I've heard you've gotten really good at not watching too much TV. Can you help me out? They make posters, and we've had one school made copies, and they put them in the local restaurants so that The idea is to get the whole community involved. Educating parents, I think, is a big part of what we've tried to do. And so we have family fun nights. We've gotten our art center to teach crafts. We've gotten our YMCA has each year provided 10-day family passes to the YMCA for every student. And the first year we had over 2,000 kids. It cost $10 a day for a family pass. That ended up being a $200,000 donation from the YMCA. I was worried about going to the Y because, you know, I knew it must just be crazy. And at the end of it, I went and talked with them, and they laughed. They said, yeah, it was pretty crazy. We had tons of kids. But they said normally when we have more than 20 kids in the pool, we have problems. They said no behavior problems at all. They've now upped it up to, for the older kids, a full month. We wanted to collect data on the aggression. So our evaluator trained retired elementary teachers. They'd have 3 of these observers. They'd go to the playground. They'd divide up different areas. One would take the playground area, and they'd keep track of every time they saw kids hit, push, punch, etc. The first day, they'd throw the data out because the kids were just, you know, following them. What are you doing here? But they collected data 3 days before the screen-free and then the last 3 days of the screen-free. And we were actually shocked. Like Stanford, we just saw a huge reduction in aggression on the playground. Then University of Michigan worked with us to collect data on classroom behavior. And again, we saw the negative behavior basically cut in half. The first year, we had 17 elementary schools take part, and half of them were doing the screen-free during the state assessment. So we compared how those kids did with kids that were watching TV, and they did quite a bit better on the state assessment. We collected 5 years of data and saw that same pattern. Escanaba Junior High. Initially, we thought we would just work with elementary schools, but I got a call from Escanaba Junior High, the principal. He said, Chris, I got a group of teachers here that said our older kids need this even more than the younger ones. So we worked with the curriculum and adapted some of the lessons, but it did not go very well. Some of the comments. No one will do it. Violent video games are just a game, and I love the last one. I don't get it. So a wonderful 8th grade social studies teacher, Deb Lato, said, okay, if you don't like this, you do the research and you decide what the solutions are. So she developed a 3-week unit. The kids, she had them pair up, and she gave them a list of some safe websites that have the research. Harvard Medical School has a great website. And she told them, you have to look at 4 resources, and she gave them 3x5 cards. She said, you have to come up with 4 problems, and then on the back, 4 solutions. And you have to read research articles and identify data. And she would not let them print anything off, which I think is brilliant, because it forced the kids to read it and then to summarize. You know, okay, what's the big information? Then they created PowerPoints, and they educated other kids and actually educated parents. And then the campaign product. Like the video that Bob showed earlier, we had a lot of kids that made those 60-second video ads about the dangers of too much media. But my favorite are these T-shirts. There's a screen, and it says, the average American watches more than 4.5 hours of TV each day. In a 65-year life, that person will have spent 9 years glued to the tube, and on the back, get your life back. And then it's got words like running, camping, swimming, fishing, etc. So we have several different examples of the T-shirts the kids made, but what we found is that as they read the research, you could just feel their attitude change. And I remember one girl in particular reading about the ADD research. She said, oh my gosh, my little brother has ADD and he's always watching TV. So the kids went from being very skeptical and negative to being positive and wanting to educate others. We did focus groups with the kids and asked what changed your mind. The school shooting, I like the one, brothers and sisters have calmed down. With the high school, we are having them actually develop products. This class made books for little kids about too much media and then went down to the 2nd grade and read them. Then we had teachers, the science teachers wanted to do something, the English teachers wanted to do something. So we now have a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade where the 6th grade focuses on research connecting excessive media to health problems, obesity, those kinds of issues. Then the middle one is looking at if kids are inside, they're not outside in nature. And some of the research that Michael Rich talked about with the media multitasking, there's some great research about you need to go outside. Then 8th grade focuses on the behavior. But what we also did, or the teachers did, is they had each subject do some of the lessons. So the science did 2 lessons, the English did 2 lessons, social studies, and English language arts. So it's a big book with 380 pages, but each teacher only has to do 2 or 3 lessons. Data. The red data for our federal grants back in 03-04, we did survey data with over 400 students. And then in 07-08, the red includes 9 of our junior highs, all 9. The green is just Escanaba, because Escanaba back in 05 started doing the lessons with the junior high kids. And then in 08, the other junior highs started to get involved. But percent of kids watching less than 3 hours a day. This slide is percent of 7th grade kids watching less than 1 hour of TV a day. And when you think back to that survey where the average teenager is watching 4.5 hours a day, Escanaba has 55% of their 7th graders really not watching much TV at all. We have a Youth Correctional Center, 40 high school students from around the state. They are incarcerated for about 1.5 years. And we did the program with them. They went 21 days without screens. And each student, they have a file where they write down all the incidents. The director of the Correction Center took off all the student names and then highlighted all the aggressive incidents. And they had a 43% reduction in aggressive incidents. And some of them were very aggressive. I remember one was throwing a chair at a teacher. The center this last summer did the program again, and I remember one teacher said at the end of the first lesson, one girl came up to her and said, I'm writing a letter to my mom because my little brother is on those video games all the time. So even kids that are incarcerated, many cases for some very violent crimes, when they think about their younger brothers and sisters, they want to do something. If you remember, requests for toys, but toys are not the only thing that TV and movies sell. Tobacco. Superman with Christopher Reeve, Marlboro paid to have Lois Lane smoke Marlboro cigarettes. They're not supposed to be doing that now, but you can't convince me there isn't some money. We started seeing reduction in, this is cigarettes, and we hadn't expected that. So I started, I Googled, and sure enough, there's a ton of research. The more movies and TV, in fact, Dartmouth Medical School, they, 35% of all teenage smokers, it's because of the exposure to TV and movies. But alcohol, and sure enough, a year later, they released a study that all kinds of risky behaviors. And again, we saw reductions in alcohol use, marijuana, binge drinking, and we had not really expected that. The Center for Media and Child Health, which is Boston Children's College or Hospital and Harvard Medical School, have a great website. They've got close to 7,000 research articles. 2 years ago, they came and collected a lot of data, so they're analyzing the data right now. One of the things that is showing up, the kids get more sleep. But I don't think it's just the bad things that aren't happening, but it's the good things that are happening. These are, during the screen-free, the kids write down what they did instead of watching TV. So spending time with parents, dads. Last night I read with my mom. Reading and going to sleep. Definitely the teachers tell us the kids come to school and they are awake. The one little drawing was the little boy whose mom had sent a note to school. How dare the school tell us we should not be watching TV? We are not going to take part in this. So the first day he wrote about the TV program that he watched, and the teacher just wrote, remember, no TV, smiley face. The next day he wrote about the movie he saw, and she wrote, remember, no movies, smiley face. The third day he said, guess what? I did not watch TV. I went on a bike ride with my mom. So even the more reluctant parents, the kids start educating them. And what do students say? I just want to read a few of these. The newspaper interviewed some fourth grade kids. I like being in the program and doing different things. My dad taught me a hard grown-up game. It was fun. Kaylee, instead of watching TV, I went outside, played cards, and read my book. I feel like my life is much better. What do parents say? I used to think we were a close family until we turned off the TV for a week. Now we know what it really means to be close. Love the idea that I could blame the principal. 8th grade students. Well, the TV turn-off was really good. Me being my dumb self, forgot to get the slip signed. Otherwise, yeah, it was a really good program. It helped me focus on my homework and doing my chores. The prizes were really cool. Another 8th grade student, what I liked is you find that there are other things to do besides TV. I usually couldn't find anything to do besides TV when Mom would tell me to get off. I thought it was really cool. When you do it for a long period of time, it began to get really easy to find things to do. And then I think it should have been before football season. Other than that, the TV turn-off really had a great effect. At first, I didn't think TV had any negative effects on people, but after doing it, I was concentrating better, doing my work better, and I was more organized. And one of my favorite slides. Instead of TV, I used my imagination. And one principal said she got a note from one of her 4th grade students. She said she'd never gotten a note from a student before. And the note said, Dear Mrs. P, this program makes me feel more responsible. I have time to do my homework, and I spend more time with my family. It is so cool. We all laughed together over not so funny things, and I love it. Thank you very much. So when our children are telling us that we need less media, we need you to help us, just as Jacques said, I think with our children we can make a difference. Thank you all.